The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary, which is not news. It is simple opinion, yours and mine. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us today. We we found out a couple of things last week. I have been. John Williard is back. Hello. God bless you, John Williard. You know, I've been in radio for almost half a century. It's going to be it's going to be half a century here soon. Oh man. Anyway, and in that time, I've had the privilege of working with, in reality, some of the most talented human beings on the planet. You may not know their names, and they may not be standing up in front of some television camera somewhere getting this beautiful trophy and talking about whatever. But they are incredibly talented people, and I've had the privilege to be able to work with them. And one of them is John Williard. And John has the most beautiful voice I've ever heard. And I got to work with him in one of the greatest radio stations that ever played a record or had somebody turning on a microphone, and that was 94Q in Atlanta. And it's always good to have John here. John, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. I discovered last week that where you normally see the Wells Report was on Facebook was not being shown, and that had to do with that was a crazy thing that happened with all the things that I do. You know, one of the things about working in radio stations, your job is to stand in the on-air studio and do what you do. That's your job. And you use the equipment put together by incredibly talented people called engineers. and I am now certainly not talented in any way, shape, or form when it comes to engineering. But I have to admit, I took a lot of that for granted. I said, well, this is, it's like a race driver. Race drivers do not build the car. They don't pay the bills. They don't do that. They just drive the car. Well, that was basically what I did. I got into the studio and drove the car. Drove the studio, drove the radio station. And all that work behind the scenes, people selling advertising, people making sure all the bills get paid, people making sure the equipment works, people setting up all of these promotional events that I would go out and do. Those people, and I was always very thankful for them, but I've now seen exactly how hard that is and why there are so many job titles that cover all of those things for a successful broadcasting enterprise, because now I have to do all of it. And I'm not good at a lot of it. The stuff that I do, from me talking to this microphone, talking to you, doing all this, I can do that. But getting all the equipment lined up, oh my, not necessarily the way that is. Anyway, I discovered that the Wells Report was not being shown on the Wells Report page. It was being shown on my personal page, which, by the way, brought up a whole bunch of people that had not seen the Wells Report, thought I had vanished, and so on and so forth, which was nice. But the people that had been depending on the Wells Report on the Wells Report page were not getting it. Well, I discovered how to fix it. And so, hi. I hope you got a little note. By the way, Gary Olivier, another one of my very, very close friends, one of my brothers in the Texas State Guard, Gary, did you get an invite this time? Did you get a little note saying that the Facebook broadcast was back on? I sure would appreciate it if you'd let me know. So as we come to this broadcast, what I'd like to do is I'd like to discuss the disgusting, and a lot of the disgusting is political because we find ourselves in a place where, and don't ask me why, but for whatever reason, the media has both insinuated itself and then exploited the political process in this nation as their stock in trade for news, what is news coverage around the country. And this broadcast was not intended to be a political broadcast, but it is thought of as being political because I cover the news. And what does the news cover? Well, the news covers politics. And it's tiresome and it's endlessly ridiculous. And it drives me completely batty, especially when it comes to things like this ridiculous debt ceiling trash. Our government, I'm going to go over here because I'm going to say some opinion things. I differentiate between news and opinion here. This government is occupied by incompetence. Now, some of it is true incompetence. These people are stupid. They are popular, but they are kind of dumb. And so they do kind of dumb things. But there is also group dumbness, which is based essentially on group think. And that happens when this otherwise normal human being gets elected to public office and then is immersed in this bubble community of people that stop thinking about reality and start thinking about things in governmental terms. Except their deficits in thinking to begin with are amplified by the fact that they're now in a bunch of they're within a group of people that, for all intents and purposes, most of them could not succeed at the level they succeed in government in the private sector. And so what they do is they take their intrinsic inabilities and essentially foist them on both the nation and the people. And so in doing so, they come up with these tortured explanations for things that are pretty obvious. And yet, in a political sense, in a national sense, they are somehow different. The laws of gravity do not apply to the United States government. That is an example of the institutional incompetence that warps otherwise competent people into behavior that is at one point laughable, at the other point tragic, and at the most important point too ferociously expensive to continue. Collectively, throughout the decades, these morons have spent the United States into a $31.7 trillion debt. Now, I'm not talking about Democrat morons. I'm not talking about Republican morons. I'm talking about political morons. Now, there are a lot of people that are in the political world that are not morons at all. They are destructors. They are people that can only see the sociopathic need for them to be smarter than everybody else. And instead of going out like, say, for example, Elon Musk, and even though he's turning himself into a cartoon of himself, Bill Gates, all of these creators that went out and Jeff Bezos, all of these people that went out and did amazing things and made amazingly huge amounts of money and so on and so forth. Instead of doing that, what these people do is they chase domination of others. And this nation is being abused by those people for that reason. And those people kind of use the idiots as camouflage. Perfect example. And once again, this is not a personal thing. John Fetterman. John Fetterman walking around in black shorts and a black hoodie. He's a senator of the United States, but he is also a very useful stooge. He's also a very useful stooge because while you're looking at John Fetterman dressed up as a gangland hood from South Philly, when he's walking around like that, they don't have to work to actually explain what they're doing. And this takes us back to the debt ceiling. I want to make this abundantly clear. The anti-gravity aspect of the debt ceiling is something that otherwise reasonable human beings are willing to suspend disbelief in an effort to continue pursuing this ridiculous notion of a debt ceiling that has to be increased so that bills that have already been incurred by the government can be paid. That is flamingly ridiculous. It is quite literally a backwards explanation or a backwards rationalization for what is actually happening. If you find yourself in a position where you have to borrow money to pay your bills, you're incompetent. And that is happening at a level that's now brought us to $31.7 trillion of national debt, and they're trying to add to it. And they're trying to bring us up to, oh my God, if the government of the United States default, it'll kill the entire economy of the world. Are you kidding? The good faith and credit of the United States will be at risk. Well, you'll have to forgive me, but anybody with a brain that can see a $31.7 trillion debt in any country except the United States, Greece comes to mind immediately. Those people have been under this austerity program trying to get their government out of incredible debt from a percentage standpoint. They're looking at us and going, why are we listening to those people telling us how we're supposed to spend our money? They don't have any idea what they're doing. Now, obviously, there are other ramifications. Socialism is incredibly expensive and it's unsustainable. And that's exactly where people are trying to take us in this nation. But this nation is being run by fools that seemingly want to defy gravity by saying we have to borrow more money to pay our bills because of the bills and spending that we've already incurred and spent. And if we don't, everything's going to fly apart at the seams. And there's exactly one human being on the planet that understands exactly what I'm saying, and that's Donald Trump. Now, this is not a partisan broadcast. Donald Trump sees things in a different way that's outside the norm of American politics, which is this little culture of incompetence. He sees things outside that. He just looks at somebody and says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to just go, we ought to just default. We should just default because, you know, we're going to have to eventually anyway. Which blows a hole in all of this ridiculous kabuki theater dumbness that political powers are throwing at us based on something called the debt ceiling. I'll explain all this coming up in just a couple of moments. Maybe I jumped ahead. But what I want to tell you is the latest chapter in the silliness. There are more colorful terms that are coming to my mind. In the silliness of the debt ceiling. I'll get that to you in just a couple of moments. You're watching the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being right here, right now. We will be back with more in just a moment. Thanks for listening to the Wells Report, more of which continues in 6 minutes. By the way, it's not going to be 6 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes. I just played the wrong music bed. We'll be back in just about 1 minute and 20 seconds. So stay right where you are while I sit around and fumble and try to figure out why I keep playing the wrong music bed. Jeez. You found the Wells Report, more of which continues in 5 minutes. In 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute. Don't be deceived by the guy behind the window or whatever that is. You're listening. That was smooth. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. You got an echo, Randy? Is there an echo going on? Where's the echo? Does anybody hear an echo? Hello? Hello? Oh, you're talking about me talking about me. Right, I got it. Yeah, I voiced those so that you know how much time we had. So let me give you the latest garbage when it comes to the debt ceiling. This from Fox News. There are talks, again, no agreement, no bill, nothing close, as Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen reiterated on NBC yesterday. The hard deadline is June 1st. My God, it's the 22nd. Yeah, we have exactly, 9 days now? How many, let's say, January, February, March, April, May. Okay, 31 days in May. So what do we have here? We have, 10 days, 9 days? We've got 9 days to solve everything. We've got 9 days to put the country into even deeper debt. And yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to add a package of cuts, meaningful cuts in the trillions of dollars, maybe $3-4 trillion. That's great, except we're $31.7 trillion in debt. Yep, the hard deadline, according to Treasury Secretary Yellen, is June 1st. It's a hard deadline. It's a red line. It's a point of no return. It's the edge of the abyss. She added the government would struggle to pay its bills beyond June 15th if Congress doesn't take action. So what's the deadline? Is it June 1st or is it June 15th? And why in heaven's name would the United States Treasury, sitting on a pile of cash, a mountain of cash, an entire planet of cash, why would they struggle to pay their bills? There's only one reason. The Treasury Secretary is flipping incompetent. So Fox News asks, how do the sides sidestep an epic collision with the debt ceiling? It's not epic anything. It's just foolery. Yeah, foolery. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Star Coomer says, hey, why don't we just have Congress take a pay cut? Because of the drops in the bucket. This is a drop in the drop. It is a drop in the drop of a drop in the bucket. It's just the stuff we pay these people is minuscule in comparison. I mean, it's not even, it's microscopic. It might even be at quantum level, which is like particles of atoms, that small when you start talking about the people being paid. Oh, I think it's $175,000 a year to represent us. They don't represent anything except their own foolishness. So let's move on. One Republican lawmaker talking to Fox News suggested the government was rushing on a cruise control toward the debt limit, and Congress was past the point of no return on a crisis. Oh, will you stop it? There's too much to do and too little time if the date is June 1st. Well, we've already found out that it's actually the 15th, according to the Treasury Secretary. Yeah, the government will have trouble paying its bills unless beginning on June 15th. Well, what's the deadline then? See, this is the goop. This is the ridiculous gobbledygookian foolishness that we find ourselves every single, what is it, every 2 or 3 years like clockwork? This is stupid. So today, because President Biden came home early from the G7 summit to be able to handle this very important domestic crisis. So they're going to talk today, I guess. They're going to hammer out a deal. What they're probably going to do is they're probably going to sit on the back portico of the White House and enjoy some Cuban cigars and some really fine cognac. And they're going to sit around and talk about, you know, the silliness of the American people and how dumb all of us are to keep sending them back to office. And they're just going to wait until all the staff people get things actually accomplished. And then at the last second, in a dramatic fashion, they're going to announce that they've come up with a deal. Well, nobody's going to like it, but at least we've got a deal. At least we've got something that we can do to be able to keep this country from horrifying ruination. Yeah, it is cuckoo. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're talking about the ridiculous foolishness known as the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling talks. The country is up against a huge problem. We could default on our debt. We're $31.7 trillion in debt right now. We're trying to raise that so we can keep this broken system going. We're already in default on our debts, to the tune of $31.7 trillion. And everybody says, my God, we've got to pass the debt ceiling because all that money has been spent. And now we have to pay it off. Yeah, it's like a credit card. You see, you've already spent the money. Now you have to pay it back with interest. Okay? So now you're in a situation where you're trying to get your credit card limit raised in order to pay your bills. Negative. No, stop, cease, quit. It's okay with me if you resign because you're clearly in over your head. And that so many people in the mainstream media are somehow justifying the fact, well, we've got to pass the debt limit so we can pay our bills. No. If you can't pay your bills, whose fault is it? That's right. It's the Congress's fault. It's the government's fault. It's embezzlement. And they are responsible, and all they're trying to do with all of this is trying to distract us from that reality. And it just plain drives me up the wall. It should drive you up the wall. It should drive everybody up the wall, and it should cost these people their jobs. And I know what you're thinking. But John David, if they don't have these jobs, they'll be in the private sector, destroying people's lives in the private sector. Correct. I understand. The problem with people like this is it's not what they can think up while they're in office. It's what they're going to think up next. Oh, my God. Okay. I'm all right now. I'm okay. Seriously, I'm okay. Whew. So they're trying to figure out how they're going to be able to bridge this mess into some kind of a deal. Observers note the negotiations in this intense should have been underway since April. No. Really? Expectations, the sides would hit hiccups on the way. We have a thing. And once again, when I speak of the Texas State Guard, nothing I say has anything to do with the Texas Military Department or the Texas State Guard. It's just experience in my level. We have a couple of concepts. Okay, there are two concepts. First of all, keep the mission in front of you. Make sure that you are proactively guiding the mission in progress. When you haven't done enough preparation, when you haven't done the right things, the mission gets behind you, and suddenly you have to look over your shoulder to be able to fix problems here while you're still having to deal with the operational issue in front of you. The mission in front of you, and then the cleanup behind you. A $31.7 trillion debt is a hell of a cleanup behind you. And so we're looking over our shoulder to raise the debt ceiling. That's concept number one. Concept number two, whenever you are attempting to put something together to create, in this case, a national course of action, as you are working through all of it, you can expect at least 4 curveballs, something you didn't think about, something that you didn't anticipate. And it's because you're not doing your job properly. These curveballs, usually, sometimes they're external. Like say, for example, you're picked to sing the national anthem for the 7th game of the World Series. You've been practicing all your life to be able to stand there with a microphone and sing the national anthem on national television in front of everybody. And you're singing, and it's beautiful, and everything is great, and then a yellow jacket flies up one of your nostrils. That's the kind of curveball I'm talking about. And you have to plan, you have to expect 4, but plan for 5. And that these people don't understand either of those concepts, keeping the mission in front of you and planning for curveballs, is more annoying than the problem itself. Because not only did they not anticipate the problem, not only did they not create the problem, but now they don't know how to deal with it after they created it. It's incompetence on so many counts. It's scarcely hard to describe. It's literally indescribable. So let's keep going on with this. My God, they should have been talking since April. Yeah. They should have anticipated the hiccups. They can't. They're too stupid. The pause could cost the sides nearly 3 days of talks. So, anyone who has watched the negotiations knows that speed bumps are inevitable. No. Speed bumps are the result of stupidity. That is exactly what's going on. It's possible there could be more. They may not have time to wrap this up because Kevin McCarthy said that he's going to insist on adhering to the House 72-hour rule. Yeah, that's the rule where people that are voting on trillions of dollars worth of spending actually have 3 days to go over what they're voting on, which is good. It adds some measure of accountability because at some level, these people have to be held responsible for this thievery. That allows members to study and consider any bill. It also means the House may not even debate or vote on the bill until the coming weekend. That means the Senate, who's going to get it next because the House has the power over the purse, unless you're Joe Biden and think that you have some other way of being able to spend money. May not even get the legislation until Monday, May 29th. That's Memorial Day. Even if the Senate is really humming, it could take until the next Wednesday. That's May 31st, but more likely June 1st or 2nd over the deadline, which, by the way, has magically, according to Treasury Secretary Yellen, moved from the 1st to the 15th. There's another reason for this. There's another explanation for this. There's another way of describing what we're dealing with, aside from incompetence and boobery and letting the mission get behind you and not anticipating curveballs. There's another way of dealing with this. It's lying. They're just lying to us. Yeah, the Senate might get it on Memorial Day, and if they're really humming, well, they won't take it up until Wednesday to wrap things up. Wednesday the 31st, but more likely June 1st or 2nd over the horrifying deadline. Yeah, well, once again, they're setting us up for saving us at the last moment from a horrifying tragedy no one even wants to complicate or contemplate that they created themselves so they could solve the problem and look like heroes. They just look like zeros to me. They look like idiots. So stupid. I'm so frustrated with this. I am so frustrated with this. It's about math, mixing the cocktail of Republican and Democrat votes to pass a still theoretical bill. It's not theoretical. The House has already passed a bill. The Senate is now responsible for the bill that the House passed. That's the basic solution to all of this. And so the Senate has to sit there and go, well, oh my God, it's too much. There's way too much cut. There's too much cut out of this. So the reductions in spending are just too steep. And it's because of that damn Trump and those tax cuts. He gave the people of the United States back their own money so we can't spend it. Worthless scum. Easy, boy. Be chilly. Be cool. Sorry. House Republicans have long talked about wanting a majority of the majority to be in favor of any prospective package. That way, if everybody agrees, Democrats and Republicans, if everybody agrees and they come up with this great bipartisan solution, then nobody's to blame for adding another huge, gigantic $1 trillion chunk of debt to a $31.7 trillion debt already. It's ridiculous. And then there's this. But how does McCarthy agree to any pact when he doesn't have close to the 200 of the 222 Republicans in the House in favor of it? Well, that's not real either, because there were 213 votes that passed the original bill to begin with. It's likely that anywhere from 20 to 40 House Republicans are hard-nosed on any bill that does not replicate the debt ceiling bill muscled through last month. Well, of course not. They've already voted for this. And they'll vote for it again if it comes back up again. But if they substantially change it, they're not going to vote for it. Fine. It's okay with me. Because believe me, a Congress that is deadlocked does less damage. Fox News is told that McCarthy's floor is 180 GOP yays. That's yeses. One knowledgeable source told Fox anything south of 180 could mean a conservative Republican files a motion to vacate the chair and force the removal of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. I think Kevin McCarthy is a nice enough guy. You know, I think his heart is in the right place. But I could not give about whether or not he's the Speaker of the House of Representatives at all. It doesn't make any difference who the Speaker of the House is. All we'll have is a different head clown in the show. There's a word in front of that show, but I've already bleeped myself once in this. I don't care. I don't care who's at the wheel of the Titanic at this point. I don't care. Either you find a way to keep this ship from sinking or get out of the way from someone who can. And the people of the United States had better wake up. These people are stealing from us. And they come up with these cockamamie explanations for why stealing from us is something we should all get behind and push through. Are you stupid? Is this a joke? You know what this whole fight is? This whole fight is about going back to the 2022 budget, which was before COVID. You know, somebody's already pointed out, my God, Trump spent all of this money. No, he spent the money and it was the government that did it in a bipartisan exercise to try to fund some kind of a COVID remedy. But did he spend it? Sure he did. Was it outrageous? Yeah. Did it work? No. It didn't. It worked to create a whole bunch of inflation. By the way, the Fed is doing a pretty good job in controlling inflation. I have to give it to them. They're slowly bringing it down at a level that does not snap back and give us another Great Depression, which is exactly what happened. The Fed is the reason we had a Great Depression, you know. That was the problem because they tightened up the banking policies and the entire economy crashed. And they learned. And they've gone through it since the 2008 mess. Yeah, they've gone through it already. They know how to do it, and they're doing pretty good work, but it is hurting a lot of people. It is. Oh, here's a good question. JD, if you were the president of the United States, what would you do? Okay, I'll tell you. This is what I would do. The first thing that I would do is this. I would tell, well, actually, the first thing I would do is I would tell every executive branch agency, this is not the first thing. Well, what would be the first thing I would do? The first thing I would do is I'd pass a bill that says that if you incorporate as a business in the United States of America, you must conform to the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. This includes your workers. They will have free speech. They will have freedom to assemble. They will be able to redress their grievances with management. They will be able to do all of these things. They will be able to go home, criticize their company on Facebook, and not get fired for it. Because that's free speech. That's the first thing that I do. The second thing that I would do is I would say we need to pass a bill protecting the intellectual property rights of the people of the United States, which means that anything that I share on this device belongs to me. It doesn't belong to the FBI. It doesn't belong to anybody except me and the person I'm sharing it with. But even the person I'm sharing it with doesn't have rights to the stuff that I give them on this phone. Intellectual property rights. Are there other things that I would do, since Martha brought this up? Are there other things that I would do if I was the president of the United States? Yes, there are. And I'll tell you about them next. And we will get to this budget issue. We will. And it'll happen right after we say, stick around. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. Somebody asked me what I would do if I was in charge. You know, you do a great job running your mouth about what all these people should do and so on and so forth. What would you do if you were the president of the United States? Well, I told you. One, if you're a corporation doing business in the United States, you would have to conform to the precepts and understandings and court rulings regarding the Constitution of the United States. That's thing number one. And if you can't do that, then why are you doing business in this country? That's thing number one. Thing number two, we would establish and protect Americans' intellectual property. Thing number three, we would establish a law, very much like the law that tells us when the official legal definition for the end of life is. We would have a law that establishes the legal definition of when life begins, and therefore eradicate the national migraine headache around the protection of gestating babies, and solve the problem once and for all and remove forever the political football that one of the most heart-rending, in other words, to tear, heart-rending issues that has plagued this nation for decades. Oh, that's all well and good, and that's all nice and philosophical and blah, 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 blah. Okay, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do about the economy? Here's what I'm going to do. When you force corporations to deal with constitutional rights and precepts, it changes the way they do business. Suddenly, they have to start thinking about the country in which they do business. In other words, they now have a stake in the success of the nation instead of just using the nation as a piggy bank, as a convenient bank to rob. That's thing number one. Thing number two, I would establish a flat tax system. It would be regressive. In other words, if you made from, say, for example, I don't know, up to $250,000, you'd pay 12%, which is about half your tax bill right now. If you made less than $500,000 and above $250,000, you'd pay 10%. If you made $1 million down to $500,000, you'd pay 8%. If you paid anything over $1 million, and these brackets would change. If you pay anything more than 12, 10, 8, then you'd pay, say, for example, 6% of everything you make. Everything. Instead of expecting all these people to carry the entire country, thereby working for nothing. Because you want these people to be able to create wealth. Then what I would do is this. I would put the federal government of the United States on a spending limit. Spending limit. Somewhere around 18% gross domestic product. Gross domestic product. 18%. What does that do? Why would you do that? Well, because they're spending 14% now. And if there was and it would be a constitutional amendment. The government of the United States cannot spend more than 18% of gross domestic product at any reason, for any reason at any time, period. It'd be in the Constitution. And what would happen? What would happen is this. The government of the United States, as we have this conversation, has the central bank, the Fed, creating a recession, putting a dampener on gross domestic product. In order to keep prices down, what we're doing is we're collapsing the economy a little bit. And they're doing a great job. The inflation numbers go down, 8, 6, 5, 4. It's coming down. It's going to take a while longer. That means that any raise you got, gone. And so you're probably struggling, just like we are here in this house. So as a matter of government policy, as we have this conversation, we are damaging our economy and lowering our gross domestic product. If you are a politician and the only way that you can have more money to spend is to grow the economy, then what would end up happening is that you wouldn't do things to damage the economy for the sake of politics. You see what I mean? In other words, you would have skin in the game that the country, the United States of America, be successful economically. If we were to do those things, return real power to the people, we'd be able to disassociate the politics from the FBI and the DOJ, return them to being law interpreting and law enforcement bodies. And by the way, if I was the president of the United States and I caught somebody running a law enforcement intelligence agency, Homeland Security Agency, and if I caught them playing politics, they would be gone so fast that quite literally the air in their lungs would take 15 minutes to catch up to them as they found themselves face down on the street. Not dead, mind you, just thrown out of the building. You play politics with my government when you're not a politician, you're gone. You do your job. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of seconds. Thanks very much for joining us today. I really mean it. Thank you. President John Wells. It's a disaster. Thanks for listening to the Wells Report, more of which continues in 6 minutes. You found the Wells Report, more of which continues in 5 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. Oops. Okay. This is the Wells Report. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will... I don't know why my slide went away. So anyway, stop making fun of my lounging clothes. They're not jammies. Oops. North to south, coast to coast, and around the world, this is the Wells Report. What do we do here? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That's not news. That's you and me talking about the things that are important to this nation. Whether people like it or don't like it, no problem. If you disagree, get in touch. Tell me where I'm getting it wrong. By all means, get in touch and tell me what I'm getting wrong. Because this is a conclave. This is where we get together to find truth and solutions. Politics loves problems but hates solutions. My God, with solution comes accountability. What if the solution doesn't work? Then think of another one. What we have to do in this nation is return this nation to the people who own it. We, the people. We send these people to Washington, D.C., and what they end up trying to do is destroy the nation. We know that's true because we're $31.7 trillion in debt. I had a show all prepared today. I had a show prepared. And it was derailed because I was so frustrated and angry about the state of this nation regarding this ridiculous debt ceiling garbage. Debt ceiling. You're borrowing money to pay your bills. That's incompetence. Okay. So, in that conversation, Martha Brothers was so kind as to ask me, okay, what would you do as president? So, the last part of last hour, I started talking about what I would do as president. I'm going to continue that conversation. That means that at this particular moment, if you have a question as to what I would do as president, I want you to either join me on the chat room, which is at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And I want you to ask me questions, just like Martha did. JD, if you were the president, what would you do? And I'll answer those questions. And since this is news that is both honest and fair, if I don't know the answer, I'll say so. Then I'll ask for a solution. So at this particular moment, ask any question that you want to. Anything that you want. I will answer all questions. You can do it on the chat room. And what you can do is you can ask me anything. And we'll take this hour and we'll go through all of it. Chat room. Chat room. Somebody said, are you wearing golf clothes? Sort of. I'm going to go to Top Golf after this show and hang out with one of my buddies and work on a really beautiful game. So, in other words, ask me questions. Chat room, or you can call me on the telephone. Operator is standing by, and I will take your questions. Just ask me a question, anything. Randy asked, what would you do about the FBI? What I would do with the FBI is clean house. That's an executive branch agency. That falls under the purvey of the government, of the President of the United States and the executive branch. And I would clean house. Same thing with the Department of Homeland Security. And what I would do as a bigger project, I would tell the executive branch agencies to account for every dime they spend. Every dime they spend. And I'd go over that budget line by line. And I'd return that budget to something that actually is enough money for them to do their jobs, which is to be a regulatory force, not a law enforcement force. And then I would say, okay, I want a bill through Congress that requires Congress to give an up or down vote to every federal regulation from these executive branch agencies, so that it was on the record, so that we knew what politicians were playing big time politics with the Constitution of the United States. And I would say, okay, if you can't get it through Congress, that regulation ceases to exist. And we would have debate about every single one of those federal regulations. There would be no law enforcement capacity in any executive branch agency, except, of course, for the law enforcement branches, FBI, DEA, ATF, some of the Department of Homeland Security agencies. If I caught them playing politics, they'd be gone instantly. Gone. Bye-bye. See ya. You're playing politics. If you want to be a politician, run for office. You can't get elected. Can anybody see Peter Strzok being a member of the House of Representatives? No. No. I would return the CIA to being the eyes and ears of the nation outside of the continental United States. They would no longer be able to spy on people of the United States. That would be the FBI's job. And they better do it honestly, and they better do it fairly, or they're gone. It's going to take 3 decades for people to return trust to the FBI. And they did it to themselves, playing politics. The IRS, we've already discussed. There'd be a flat tax system. You'd be able to do your taxes in about 20 minutes at your kitchen table. That's it. Because we should not have to spend money in an effort to find out just exactly what we're supposed to pay the government. I know H&R Block is sitting there going, wait a minute, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, sorry, guys. You had a great run. Find something else. What I would do is this. I would also do this. I would tell the corporations of the United States that you're on your own. You will be constitutionally compliant, and you're on your own. There will be no more government bailouts of whatever this vaporous idea of too big to fail is defined as, either by the corporations themselves or the mainstream media. In other words, what we do, what would happen there is these people would suddenly have to start actually doing their business properly. General Motors, bailed out by the Obama administration, remember that? He saved the automotive industry. No, he saved, quote unquote, General Motors. General Motors has been on the brink of bankruptcy for decades. They have all the tools they need. They'll just have to divest themselves of the things they obviously have proven they can't handle. They'd have to split up. Chevrolet would be its own company. GMC would be its own company. Cadillac, its own company. Buick, its own company. That would create more competition. Competition being the crucible of excellence. Well, but what about all the people who lose their jobs? They'd lose their jobs for about 15 minutes. And then there would be more jobs. Because these agencies, these new companies, these new corporations that make cars, for example, would be in a situation whereby they'd be in a situation whereby they'd have to make their own living, or they'd go bankrupt. I'd let them go bankrupt. There'd be plenty of jobs. This would be a net growth for the entire economy, especially if the government would stop hurting the economy in order to spend money they don't have. The 18% spending limit on the federal government. Period. You don't get to spend a dime more than that. You screw up the economy, none of those projects get done. None. So, let's see. Why not limit spending? This is a good question. Harlan Bounds, new guy. Hi, Harlan. Welcome. Why not limit spending to only what was authorized in Article 1, Section 8? Well, because things have changed. Robert Bork, a failed nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States, said that I am a reasonable constructionist. You have to be reasonable when it comes to what has grown out of the Constitution. And you have to realize that there are more things than in this country than were there during the 18th century when these guys figured all this stuff out. You have to grow. But you don't have to throw it all away in order for some politician to have a bronze plaque someplace with his name on it that says, I overspent the government of the United States so I could have my name on this bronze plaque. It's ridiculous. So, why not limit spending to only what was authorized in Article 1, Section 8? Well, because we have to spend more money than that, but not that much more. I would return the government of the United States to doing what it's supposed to do as the federal government. We would, by God, have borders in this nation. We'd, by God, have borders in this nation. And somebody says, my God, you're just a racist that doesn't want to, feed the entire world? Right. I'm not a racist at all. Since I've been asked to be the president of the United States for this hour, I would be the president of the United States. Protect and defend this nation from all enemies, foreign and or domestic. And those people that would call me a racist because I don't let everybody in Central America move into the United States, well, there you go. By the way, what about those people? What would you do with all the people that are here? No problem. I would insist that the government of the United States pass a bill that would open up an opportunity for those people to go back to their originating countries, visit the American embassy, get a work permit good for 2 years after they prove that they had not broken the law in the United States. You break the law in the United States, gone. You're gone, especially if you're here illegally. But if you can prove that all you did was essentially live the life that people who justify all these people moving here for no reason whatsoever except that they want to have a better life, which is understandable. If you came here to be a gang member or to be a cartel that's trying to, just kills anybody that gets in their way, well, you're not coming back to the United States. And if you do, you're going straight to a federal prison. You're going to stay there until you can figure out how not to be the guy that you think you should be in order to come here and destroy the United States for the sake of your profit margin. So you go back to your country and you get yourself a work permit. It's good for 2 years. You can renew it online once for another 2 years. After that, you got to start the process all over again. In other words, when you come to the United States to work here, you're going to be here legally. And if you break the law, you're going to get deported, and it's going to stay that way. You have 180 days to get back to your originating country, go to the United States Embassy, get yourself a work permit, and then you can just drive right past. You can drive right through the international ports of entry and get back to work. And if you're a company, by the way, that has somebody working illegally in absence of this particular work permit that I'm talking about, the CEO of the company is going to go to jail for 6 months. It's a federal misdemeanor, not going to ruin your life. But you do it again, and that's a felony. And we will change your life. The CEO, that's who's responsible. This is the Wells Report. Is there more? You bet there is. I'll be right back in just one moment. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Okay, so what would I do if I was the President of the United States? Well, I would define the United States as the Constitution defined it in realistic terms. The fact that the Constitution of the United States is clear that there will be, say, for example, a border around the United States, and that is being ignored for political reasons, is a crime bordering on treason. It certainly violates the oath of office because the Constitution is plain. It's 4 pages. It's right down the road from all these buildings where these people are supposedly representing us. They can go there and read it anytime they want to. It's easy reading. It's brilliant. And what they can do is they can sit there and say, well, the federal government will be responsible for a secure border. And that's that. And anybody like Alejandro Mayorkas who says, no, the border is secure, you are fired. I would not impeach him. I wouldn't allow the Congress to waste their time because remember, the Congress is going to be going through every single federal regulation and enacting it through the legislature where laws are made. We're not going to have regulations taking the place of laws. And there's not going to be any enforcement capability on all these federal agencies. If they have a problem with, say, for example, somebody doing something, they're going to have to turn it over to the DOJ. And what would I do about the DOJ? What would I do about the Department of Justice? I would refocus the Department of Justice on justice. I would return the blindfold to law enforcement. That's what I would do. I'd do that immediately. I get rid of all these people. They work for me. Bye-bye. If you want to run for politics, you want to be a politician, run for public office. But you are using the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Department of Homeland Security as a basis to impose your agenda on the people of the United States. That comes to a rapid flipping halt. What I would also do is I'd reduce federal government agencies down to what they're supposed to do. The Department of Education, for example, would set minimum standards for education in the United States. That would be it. They would be able to audit the various school districts around the country to be able to make sure they're in compliance. And that's all. And if they're not in compliance, no federal dollars. Done. Schools would be handled by the school boards, local people. It's up to them to run their schools. They will be beholden to the parent. Now, I can't enact that. I can certainly reduce the size of the Department of Education to simply a division, a Bureau of Standards for Education in the United States, which is what it's supposed to be. But if these people were out of compliance, no federal dollars. Next. Simple. Is this boring? Am I saying things that are driving you nuts? Let's see what else. Good start. Thank you. Thank you, Star. Yeah, some local school boards are crooks too. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you allow the federal government to start intimidating parents who disagree. We'll remove that. I catch the FBI going after a parent who said something that was reasonable at a school board meeting. They usurped the power of the police of that particular community, started investigating these people. Not only would I fire them, I think I would probably bring charges against them for doing so as violations of constitutional rights. And there would be people going to jail. Jail, prison. This is the Wells Report. Stick around. I'll be right back right after this. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Tim Scott, senator, is running for public office. Hang on a second here. He's going to run for the presidency. Hang on a second. He's going to run for the presidency. Is that good? You bet it's good. Do I agree with what I've heard so far? Not all of it, but I do agree with some of it. And I want to hear more of it. Okay? So let me give you a little bit of an update here. Since we're talking about the presidency and who should hold it, it's one of the questions facing Republican Senator Tim Scott. He has officially jumped into the race for the 2024 GOP presidential nomination. Okay? And what he's talking about is this. He is declaring his candidacy today for the White House. The kickoff event is at Charleston Southern University, his alma mater. He said in an exclusive interview with Fox News that he believes that Republican primary voters are hungry for what he's talking about. He's going to join a GOP House field that includes former President Donald Trump, who should also be there, and a couple of other people. This will be good for everyone. As I said earlier, competition is the crucible of excellence, and we need excellence right now. The one thing that I am concerned about with regards to Tim Scott is that Tim Scott is a politician. We don't need more politicians. We need Americans. We don't have to agree, but we, by God, better be Americans. And how do we define America? The first thing we do is we look to the Constitution and Bill of Rights of the United States. That defines this nation. And all those who seek to circumvent the Constitution and Bill of Rights for politics or profit will have to recalibrate. I've discussed that already. And so while we're talking about, okay, me running for president, let's also talk about Tim Scott running for president. More voices are better, not worse. Getting back to what we've talked about, Ann said something interesting. The education level in this country was a lot higher than it had been since the Carter administration started the Department of Education. That's true. Because President Carter started the Department of Education. President Carter is a politician. Therefore, the Department of Education is a creature of politics. And we see that whenever you go into a school library and see material that is foisted on that library by various people with various agendas. These people aren't stupid. In order to create a socialist world, you first have to create socialist children. In order to create a sexual world, you have to create sexual children. And they're running over parents. Parents stand up and say, no, you can't do that. And what happens? They get a visit from the FBI. Are you flipping kidding me? All that comes to a screeching flippin' halt. And also points out that we don't need the government of the United States involved in anything having to do with American health care. She is correct. Because once again, we found out that the Centers for Disease Control, a federal agency, is a political agency. And we have seen through the COVID era that politics, when it comes to people's health, is destructive at every level. The fascism involved in people who disagreed with the idea that I should go out and get a COVID vaccine when it's unproven and failed, not only failed the regulatory process. The regulatory process was set aside for the sake of a political imperative. Now, you can disagree or agree with whether or not the government should have done something about COVID. There were a lot of people that lost their lives. But how many of those people lost their lives to the flu as opposed to COVID? We don't know. Because there was a political opportunity to set aside the Constitution and Bill of Rights of the United States and essentially entertain the grotesque, baleful eye of fascism in this nation to make people comply, to force people to comply. And that is not American. So how do you keep people healthy? Well, you get the people that are out for money out of the health industry. You turn it back to doctors. You turn it back to the people of the United States seeing their doctor without somebody from an insurance company or the government standing in the exam room. You get out of the way. That's something you could do. Let's see, be careful because YouTube may block you again based on my COVID statements. What are my COVID statements? What are my COVID statements? I took 3 shots. Here's the news. Okay, let me go to the news camera. I took 3 COVID shots, the series and a booster. I've had COVID twice. That's not some disinformation. That is my story. That is my news. I'm sharing it with you. It's also truthful. It's not misinformation under any circumstance. I'm not saying that the government shouldn't have done something. But setting aside regulation for the sake of politics is disastrous. And if YouTube wants to blow me off for that, that's fine. Okay, that's good. That's okay. Go right ahead. I can live without YouTube, and so can you. So I'm fine with it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to flank YouTube and everybody else. I'm going to do this in a way that I handle, that I administrate. I'm not going to listen to somebody else tell me what I, as John David Wells, news reporter, find as news. And I am not going to turn away from the First Amendment of the Constitution for the sake of their political agenda. Talking about Google. And yeah, if I'm the president of the United States, they have got to conform to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Easy. While we're doing this, let's talk a little bit about the mainstream media. If I was the president of the United States, I would ask for a bill through the legislature to reimpose two important things: truth in news. Truth in news. Now, I would not create a department of truth, a ministry of truth. That's not what I'm talking about. I would say that what you have to do is you have to first tell the truth in news. You have to differentiate between news and commentary. News is facts. That's it. News is fact. Commentary is opinion. I know it can be done. I do it every day. And then I would ask for a bill to reimpose the fairness doctrine, where everybody gets to speak. And these conversations would be civil and they would be constructive. And I would use the bully pulpit to not impose, but certainly coerce. I'd stand up there and say, I saw this on the news the other day, and I went to everybody that knows, and I said, that's garbage. And if it hurts the feelings of somebody who says, no, wait a minute, the president of the United States just said that the report that I made was garbage. Yeah. And you got a Pulitzer Prize for it too. But it's still garbage. I just say so. You want to find out why I call it garbage? Have me on your broadcast. I'll be more than happy to handle it for you. Didn't Republicans block the fairness doctrine? Maybe. That was part of that regulation, that deregulation from the Reagan years. And it was also reinforced in 1996 with the Telecommunications Act. I have no problem whatsoever differentiating between news and comment. I even tell you when I'm doing it. This is just my opinion. How hard is that? It's not hard at all. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest broadcasters in the history of the United States, Paul Harvey, did it several times a day. We need to return to real information as a part of the news, instead of a political agenda foisted on us by borderline fascists trying to tell us what to think. It's none of your business what I think. It's my business what I think. And instead of sending the FBI out to stomp on parents at school board meetings, well, let's do something different. Let's send out the Department of Education to find out whether or not these people are compliant and not sharing obscene materials with people under 18. If they are, no federal money. There's no law enforcement, just no federal money. There you go. Done. No law enforcement. The power of the purse. And all this stuff would stop immediately. Instantly, in fact. So now we're in a situation where you would go, okay, by the way, I'm still asking questions. What would you like me to do as president? What questions do you have? How would I handle it? Okay, let's see. And if those parents threaten violence, what should happen? Well, if somebody believed that the parent threatened violence, they should call the cops. Not the feds, not the FBI, not the DOJ, the cops. In their own town. Because, in a lot of countries, in a lot of places, the sheriff's elected. That's part of that democracy process. You go out there and you arrest somebody for talking about how somebody is foisting some obscene material on your kid. And somebody says, my God, he said he was going to burn down the school building. Okay, fine. That could get you arrested. That's a terroristic threat. And you might end up in court. And you might end up having to explain yourself and your statements. And a jury would decide whether or not you were actually serious. And if you were serious and the jury thought so, you'd be punished. And if the jury didn't think so, you would be exonerated. Period. That's the way Americans do it. So that's what you do. The school board only gives a person about 2 minutes and then they shut the mic off. If you have a school board that does that, vote them out of office at your next possible opportunity. Work to make the country better. Be better stewards of the best country that anybody ever gave anybody. Ever. In the Second World War, people lined up around the block 2 or 3 times, simply trying to join the U.S. military. They were called the Greatest Generation. The next greatest generation will return, we the people, the first 3 words in the Constitution, to the driving force in the United States of America. We must be better stewards of this land. We must throw the people out that are doing their absolute dead level best to destroy it. I voted for alternates, and they weren't elected. Work harder. Work harder. Do what's necessary. Find people of like mind. Stand with them. Redress your grievances. Last time I was blocked from Facebook, they used an article printed in a Mexico City newspaper to refute me. Yep, it was printed in Spanish. Funny. Everything in it was wrong, with a couple of exceptions. Yeah. Here's what I'm telling you. You don't have to elect these homogenized, pasteurized, politically correct people to go and continue destroying the country. You can elect other people. You got to elect people with guts. You got to elect people that will have to suffer the slings and arrows of people threatened by the mainstream media saying, my God, if this guy gets elected, he's going to change everything. I'm not going to change everything. I'm not interested in destroying the United States. That's your job. No, I'm interested in restoring the United States. The people that said, make America great again, America was never great. Yeah, bye-bye. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Somebody asked me earlier today what I would do if I was the president. I've laid out a bunch of things. They all revolve around the same thing. The Constitution and Bill of Rights of the United States. It's not about me. It's about we, the people. I'm not backing off. I'm not going to back off. Not in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to continue telling the truth. And maybe that is what they fear most. The truth. The reality of this. This is America. We don't knuckle under here. We don't suspend reality for the sake of politics here. We don't turn our lives over to a government that has proven that it's incompetent. We must require a competent government adherent to the Constitution and Bill of Rights of the nation, and require those doing business in these United States to do the same thing. I'm not the only one. Stan Grant lives in Australia. He is an Indigenous journalist. He is a member of the Wiradjuri tribe of Indigenous Australians. He's a former international correspondent for CNN. He's been under fire since taking part in a panel discussion on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, another ABC, ahead of the May 6th coronation ceremony in London. Topics included a push to have a president replace the British monarch as Australia's head of state and Indigenous suffering from colonization. British troops shot Indigenous people in Australia as varmints. That's news. That's the reality. After more than 30 years in Australian television, Grant wrote in his regular Australian Broadcasting Company column that today would be the last time in the foreseeable future that he would host his weekly national panel discussion program because of racism thrown at him from citizens and government sources. I take time out because we have shown again that our history, our hard truth, is too big, too fragile, too precious for the media. The media sees only battle lines, not bridges. It sees only politics. The media has turned public discussion into an amusement park. Social media is a sordid spectacle, a grotesque burlesque. Lives are reduced to mockery and ridicule. I want no part of it. I want to find a place of grace far from the stench of media. You have something in common with Mr. Grant. You're trying to escape the stench of media. You come here. That is both a privilege and a mission that consumes me every single day. You deserve the truth. You deserve honest and truthful and fair news reporting. The free press is the free press. You can't force those people to do the right thing. You can only show them how. And that's one of my aims. But we, the people of the United States, have allowed people to do our thinking for us for far too long. Well, but everybody has a different idea. Sure. That's what elections are for. There are too many people saying too many negative things about the United States of America not to have a frank effect. The division in this nation is based on the fact that there is no fact. There's no foundation, there's no cornerstone, no touchstone for public debate. My own industry fed into that. There for a while, the biggest idiot in national talk radio won. The biggest jerk. What our entire discourse needs to be based on is fact. What we need to do is discuss, not argue. We need to debate, not for the sake of winning an argument, for the sake of improving our nation. And we haven't done that for far too long. And we've allowed other people to dictate the terms of our discourse and even our lives. It is time for we, the people, to reject it out of hand because we know it doesn't work. Let's do something different. Let's do something different. I can hope that it happens. I will work harder to make it happen. Like I said, I do this every day for that exact purpose. Could I be doing different things? Yes. Could I be doing more important things? No. And neither can you. This has been the Wells Report for the 22nd day of May, year of our Lord 2023. Thanks for watching. All right, my friends, God bless you. I've got to fix my son breakfast. And then I have to go play golf. And these are lounging clothes, not pajamas. What else? I think that's everything. Anybody have anything that they want to say before I go? No? All right. God bless all y'all. Be safe. Make good decisions.